Hello, my dear friend, and welcome to the History Question channel, a place where we slow down and listen to the stories Earth has been trying to tell us for thousands of years. Tonight, let your mind drift with the rhythm of the ocean's breath, and imagine a time when the very sands you walk on today once lay hundreds of meters beneath the sea. You've probably heard of the Great Flood, the tale found in the Bible, in the Mesopotamian epics, in the Vedas, and even in the ancient legends of the Americas. But what if it wasn't just a religious story? What if it was a collective memory of humankind, a record of a time when the world was truly wiped clean, so that it could begin again? Tonight, we search for that answer together. Could the Great Flood have been the first reset of civilization? And if so, are we the ones alive today, slowly moving toward the next one? Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine yourself drifting across a calm sea, where moonlight trembles on the surface like 1,000 forgotten memories. Beneath the waves, in the quiet blue, there are not only corals and fish, but stone and stories buried in silence. The first diver who touched the steps of Yonaguni, off the coast of Japan, must have forgotten to breathe. Before him stood vast terraces of rock, sharp-edged, geometric, as if carved by invisible hands, stairways descending into darkness, columns rising like frozen giants. And all around, that stillness, the kind that belongs only to places where time has stopped. Some say it's only nature, but there are corners too precise for nature alone. And when sonar maps reached deeper, they revealed something astonishing. Yonaguni was not alone. Thousands of kilometers west, beneath the murky waters of Gujarat, India, lies another ghost, the ancient city of Dwarka. In Hindu legend, it was the kingdom of Lord Krishna, a radiant city swallowed by the sea. Archaeologists found stone pavements, grid-like streets, and fragments of pottery dated to 9,000 years ago. Older than Egypt, older than Mesopotamia. Coincidence? Or evidence that before the world we know began, there was another world? A coastal civilization, erased by water itself? Sail farther north, to where Britain once touched the continent of Europe. There, beneath the cold, gray waves of the North Sea, lies Doggerland, a drowned landscape where hunters once walked, where deer ran through forests now turned to silt. Fishermen still pull up bones, antlers, and tools, ghosts of a homeland lost to rising seas. Doggerland is not just missing land, it is a geological memory of human loss. And in the warm waters of the east, beneath the islands of Java and Sumatra, stretch the ruins of a vanished continent, Sunda. Once, it was a single vast plain uniting Southeast Asia. Then, as the ice melted and the oceans rose, its rivers, valleys, and people disappeared beneath the tide. Only scattered islands remain, like broken fragments of an ancient mirror. Yonaguni, Dwarka, Doggerland, Sunda. 4 names, 4 notes in Earth's long symphony, each from a different ocean, yet all whispering the same melody. We were here, and then we were gone. If you listen closely, you might feel it. These stories have never truly fallen silent. They speak still, in the language of stone, of wave, of memory. Water has always worn 2 faces. It is the giver of life and the perfect eraser. It nourishes and it destroys. It cleanses sins and wipes away all proof that we ever existed. When the flood comes, it does not only drown cities, it drowns history, language, and the very questions that once defined us. The sunken cities are not just archaeological curiosities. They are the Earth's memory of humanity's first forgetting. Some believe that those who survived became the culture bearers of the new world, the gods who taught farming, astronomy, and the art of writing to the next dawn of humankind. Perhaps that is why every ancient myth of creation begins after a flood. And maybe, when you listen to the sea, what you hear is not the sound of water, but the breathing of history itself. A history not written in books, but in loss. When sunlight touches the stones of Yonaguni, they glimmer like vast letters in the language of the earth. And we, standing far above the waves, have only just learned to pronounce the first syllables. From that deep place, where light meets stone, the planet seems to whisper, "You are not the first civilization. I have seen this before, and I will see it again." The tide, the memory, the silence, they are all invitations, begging us to remember what the water tried to erase. For if the ocean can swallow cities, who can say it hasn't already swallowed an entire world? The sea falls behind us now. Its whispers fade into the distance, and the sound of waves becomes a memory, like the closing of one chapter in the planet's long dream. But where water erased, stone remembered. High on a hill in southeastern Turkey, beneath layers of quiet soil and time, lies a secret that waited 12,000 years to be found. A hill once thought to be natural, but beneath it, an idea, a heartbeat, a message. Göbekli Tepe. When archaeologists first brushed away the earth, they did not just uncover pillars and carvings. They uncovered a conversation between survivors and the future. Each limestone pillar stands in silence, T-shaped, massive, deliberate. They rise from circular enclosures arranged with mathematical grace, as if the builders were not merely stacking stones but writing something in the language of eternity. Foxes leap across the surfaces, cranes stretch their wings, serpents coil, vultures watch, and above them, the stars. Every carving seems to echo a memory of the sky. It is as though the people of Göbekli Tepe were saying, "We remember what happened up there." Archaeologists tell us this temple predates agriculture, predates writing, predates every definition we use for civilization. And yet here it stands, older than the pyramids, older than myth itself, proof that the survivors of the Great Flood were not wandering aimlessly, but building something meant to last. They were remembering. They were archiving. Imagine them, the children of a drowned world, their parents' cities lost beneath the sea, their maps erased. They climb this hill and begin again, not with tools of war, but with symbols, hoping that when the next forgetting comes, someone will still find their words carved in stone. Göbekli Tepe is not merely a temple, it is a memory vault, a monument to the act of remembering itself. The people who built it must have known that memory fades, that stories dissolve, that floods come again and again, so they built their stories into the very bones of the earth. Each pillar is a prayer, each animal a sentence, each circle a cycle of time. They buried their wisdom not in books or clay, but in geometry, in alignment, in silence. And then, the strangest thing, they covered it, deliberately, every enclosure filled in with earth and rubble, sealed tight as if protecting a sleeping child. Why bury something so monumental, so sacred? Perhaps because they knew. They knew the world was shifting again, that ice would melt, that the rains would come. They knew that survival was not just about living, but about leaving a map for those who would follow. Thousands of years later, we uncovered their map. And as the wind moved through those hollow circles, it sounded like breath, the exhale of a civilization that refused to be forgotten. When we stand among those pillars today, we are not visiting ruins. We are standing inside a message, a whisper carved in limestone. We were here. We remembered. Please, you remember too. Some scholars believe the carvings show constellations. That one pillar, the vulture stone, records a comet impact, the same cosmic event that may have ended the Ice Age. If true, then Göbekli Tepe is not only humanity's first temple, but its first observatory, its first archive of trauma, a record of fire in the sky, of the moment when heaven and earth changed forever. It is as if the builders stood at the threshold between two worlds, one drowned, one beginning, and decided to speak to both. Perhaps they buried the site so it could survive us, because every civilization believes it is the last, and yet the earth always teaches otherwise. Resets come, oceans rise, only what is buried endures. And so beneath that Turkish hill, the survivors left a time capsule. Their art, their science, their sorrow. They did not know our language, but they knew our future. They knew that one day someone would look at the sky and wonder if this has all happened before. The wind drifts through the stones, and you can almost hear them whisper, "It will happen again." Between the floods and the stars, Göbekli Tepe stands as a bridge, from the age before memory to the age that would begin it. When you look at those pillars under the twilight sky, you can feel something vast, a resonance, a hum, as though the planet itself is trying to recall a forgotten song. Perhaps that song is not about gods or sacrifice, but about continuity. The fragile line that threads through every reset, keeping some part of us alive, even when everything else is washed away. The story of Göbekli Tepe is not only an archaeological mystery, it is an emotional mirror. It asks us, when our world changes again, what will we bury for those who come next? What symbols will we leave behind to say, "We were here"? Because the people of Göbekli Tepe knew something we are still trying to understand. The world forgets, but memory can be designed, if you carve it deep enough. And so, when we brush the dust from those stones, we are not excavating the past. We are uncovering a promise, a quiet vow made by our ancestors, that knowledge can outlive catastrophe, that even after the flood, human hands will build again, and human hearts will remember. From here, the story does not end, it deepens. For as the soil of Göbekli Tepe settled over centuries, other monuments rose across the world, at Baalbek, at Pumapunku, at Giza, each one carrying the same pulse, the same impossible precision, the same whisper of inheritance. As if the survivors of the flood had scattered across continents, carrying fragments of one great memory, a blueprint for civilization itself. And so we follow them. From the buried temple of memory to the shattered stones of the high Andes, where another enigma waits, half broken, half divine. The wind over Göbekli Tepe fades into silence. The hill sleeps once more under its veil of dust. And as night unfolds across the Anatolian plains, our gaze drifts upward, toward the same heavens that those ancient hands once carved into stone. But before the floods came, before water reclaimed the world, there was something else. Fire. It is whispered in the oldest myths that the end did not begin with rain, but with flame. Long before the oceans rose, the sky itself caught fire. Around 12,800 years ago, the world shuddered. A comet, or perhaps a storm of fragments, entered Earth's thin shell of air. In a heartbeat, the sky burned brighter than 1,000 suns. Shockwaves swept across continents. Forests turned to ash. Mammoths and horses fell where they stood. Rivers boiled. And in the space between two breaths, the Ice Age ended. We call it now the Younger Dryas, a name too quiet for what it truly was. A planetary convulsion, the spark that lit the stage for the rebirth of humankind. Imagine the moment. Above the tundras of North America, the heavens erupt. Fire reigns like a storm of gods, and the air itself becomes molten. The earth, our earth, screams in light. To those who lived beneath that sky, it must have seemed as if the stars had fallen, as if creation itself had turned upon them. The ground quakes, ice sheets melt, and within days, walls of water begin their long and merciless journey across the world. Fire, then flood. Destruction, then renewal. This rhythm, carved into both geology and myth, is the heartbeat of the planet itself. Scientists find it written in the black mat, a thin layer of carbon and glass beads buried across 4 continents. Within it, microscopic diamonds and melted sand, traces of impact, the residue of a sky aflame. Beneath this layer, the bones of mammoths, mastodons, and giant sloths. Above it, silence. Extinction. To the survivors, this was no scientific event, it was apocalypse. The sun dimmed behind veils of smoke, rains turned black, and winter returned in a single night. What had been fertile became frozen. What had been safe became strange. Entire species vanished, and humanity too nearly disappeared with them. Yet somehow we endured, perhaps in caves or on mountain ridges or by the warmth of fires that never went out. And when the sky cleared and the air grew quiet again, those who survived began to tell stories. Stories of fire from heaven, stories of gods who punished the proud, stories of a world that burned, then drowned. Across continents, these tales echo the same terror. In India's Mahabharata, a weapon brighter than 10,000 suns. In Greece, faith on losing control of the chariot of the sun. Among the Hopi of North America, the world before ours ending in flames. In Norse myth, the twilight of the gods, Ragnarok, where fire consumes the heavens before the oceans rise. Different tongues, different names, but one memory, one wound. And perhaps this is why the builders of Göbekli Tepe carved their stars into stone. Perhaps they were trying to remember the day the sky fell. One pillar, the vulture stone, may depict this very event. A comet descending from the constellation Sagittarius, recorded not as superstition, but as history. A warning carved for those who would one day forget. Because the survivors of the fire knew something profound. Memory alone cannot survive disaster. Only symbols can. And so they built temples that spoke in the language of the cosmos. They turned catastrophe into geometry, tragedy into architecture, fear into faith. When we look at their carvings, we are not seeing religion, we are seeing remembrance. The Younger Dryas' impact was more than an extinction. It was a reset switch for the planet. Sea levels rose 100 meters, the air cooled, then warmed again. Continents shifted their weather, and human cultures, scattered and broken, found themselves standing on new shores, quite literally, as old coastlines vanished beneath the sea. The flood myths of the world, from Utnapishtim to Noah, from Manu to Deucalion, may all trace their lineage to this fire. Because before the flood could come, the ice had to melt. And before the ice could melt, the sky had to burn. In this way, fire and water became twin creators, the destroyers of one world and the midwives of the next. Through them, humanity was reborn, humbled, smaller, but wiser. And in the long night that followed, our ancestors looked up at the stars, not as hunters or wanderers anymore, but as witnesses. Maybe that's when the question first formed, the one still echoing in every mind that studies the past. Will it happen again? Because deep down, we know that the earth does not move in straight lines. It turns in cycles. It forgets, then remembers. And when it remembers through flame. If the flood was civilization's first reset, then this moment of falling fire was the hand that pressed the button. A celestial breath, a cosmic punctuation mark in the long sentence of creation. And what followed was silence. Ash settling like snow, rivers choked with soot, and then the first sprouts of green. Life, impossibly, beginning again. We often speak of catastrophe as ending, but to the planet it is rhythm, a resetting of the pulse. The same way we breathe, in, out. Creation, destruction, fire, water. The world exhales and civilization begins anew. Tonight as you listen, try to imagine that sky. A horizon blazing, mountains glowing red like embers, oceans steaming into clouds. The earth trembling not in anger but in renewal. And above it all, the quiet indifference of the stars. Those same stars that watched us fall, watched us rise, and now watch us remember. Because in every myth, every flood, every fire, there is the same pulse beneath the story. The universe does not end, it resets. And so do we. The fire fades now. The sky cools, the ash settles. What was once flame becomes cloud, and the cloud, rain. From smoke to vapor, from heat to tears, the planet exhales, and the first drop falls. At first it is gentle, soft rain tracing the wounds of the earth. But soon it becomes a roar. Rivers swell, glaciers melt, oceans hunger. The air grows heavy with water, and the world begins to drown. The flood was not sudden. It was a slow, unstoppable rising, a tide that did not stop for centuries. Yet to those who lived through it, it must have felt like the end of all things. The ice that had locked the poles for millennia began to die. Walls of frozen time collapsing into liquid memory. As the sun warmed, the seas answered. 100 meters. That is how far the ocean climbed, swallowing the edges of every continent. The shorelines of the old world vanished, and with them, the villages, the forests, the temples, the graves. Entire countries disappeared, so slowly that it should watch the tide creep up year after year, and yet so fast that within a few lifetimes, the maps were rewritten by water alone. This was the age when Doggerland sank. Once a green plain connecting Britain to Europe, rich with rivers, elk, and human laughter. Now a gray seabed beneath the North Sea, where fishermen still pull up bones, the last ghosts of a drowned homeland. To the east, Sundaland fell, a vast subcontinent that once united Indonesia, Malaysia, and Southeast Asia. Its rivers were as mighty as the Ganges, its valleys wide as kingdoms, and then they were gone. The ocean came in silence, and what had been one land became 1,000 islands. The people who lived there fled to higher ground, and the memory of their flight became legend. Stories of islands that sank, of gods who punished, of boats that carried the last of humankind. Farther south, the coastlines of India retreated. Dwarka, the shining city of Krishna, slipped beneath the Arabian Sea, and to the north, the icy plains of Siberia cracked open, rivers pouring into oceans that rose faster with every century. The Black Sea itself may have flooded in a single violent surge, turning farmland into ocean floor. Everywhere the world seemed to inhale, and the breath of the sea replaced the breath of the land. Archaeology confirms what myth has whispered for ages. Between 20,000 and 7,000 years ago, the face of Earth changed. Where there had been meadows, now there was depth. Where there had been cities, now only silence. And where memory once lived, there was only salt. Imagine watching your home disappear, not in fire, but in a tide that never turns back. You climb higher, you move inland, you watch the familiar vanish under a mirror of silver. The world you knew becomes a reflection. That is what it means to lose not just land, but context. For every hill that drowned, a language disappeared. For every city lost, a lineage broke. When water erases, it does not leave ruins, it leaves nothing. Fire scars, water forgets. And so the ocean became the keeper of humanity's amnesia. The survivors looked out at the new horizon, endless, shining, indifferent, and realized that their world had been rewritten. The gods of the old earth had drowned. The temples of the old stars were gone. All that remained was the rhythm of waves and the sound of breathing, our species' fragile pulse, starting again. Perhaps that is why the sea feels sacred in every culture. We fear it, and yet we return to it. We dream of it, as if our bones remember what our minds cannot. That once, we all came from the water. Not just in biology, but in history. The ocean is our first mother, and our first grave. Beneath its surface lie continents of memory. The sunken cities of Dwarka and Yonaguni, the drowned forests of Doggerland, the silent plains of Sunda. Each one a page torn from the first book of civilization. each one a reminder that what we call ancient may only be what survived the tide. If the flood was the great reset of humanity, then these vanished coastlines are the erased lines of our origin. They remind us that what we know as history is not the whole story, but only the dry part of it. The rest sleeps underwater. And perhaps someday, when technology dives deeper, we will read the seabed like a library. Columns turn to coral, streets to sand, stories sealed in silt, waiting to be remembered. But for now, the ocean holds its silence. It hums softly, like an old soul who has seen too much. Its waves are not merely water, they are memory in motion. If you listen long enough, you can almost hear the sound of cities breathing below, the echo of markets, of prayers, of laughter, folded into the song of the deep. When the waters rose, the old world did not die. It was absorbed, translated into another element, another frequency of existence. It became myth. That is why flood stories persist, because memory, like light, bends through water, distorted, shimmering, but never gone. And so when the tides receded, the survivors stepped onto a changed planet. They saw mountains where once there had been coasts, and islands where once there had been valleys. The horizon had shifted, and with it, humanity's imagination. They began to build again, on higher ground, on safer soil. They carried with them fragments of story, songs about gods and boats and stars, and somewhere in their voices, a whisper of the truth. That the sea had not only taken their homes, but had carried their past away into silence. And maybe, just maybe, those who came after could still feel that silence, like a low vibration beneath all the world's religions, all its myths of beginnings. Because every creation story, in the end, is a memory of something lost. Now, as you listen to this story, somewhere between waking and dreaming, imagine the earth itself breathing again. The glaciers are gone. The oceans shimmer in the sunlight of a new age. And out of that great flood, new civilizations rise. Egypt, Sumer, the Andes, the Indus. Each one born not from nothing, but from the memory of what drowned. History, then, is not a line. It is a tide, rising, falling, erasing, returning. And if you close your eyes, you might sense that slow rhythm still pulsing beneath us. The flood has ended, yes, but the cycle has not. Because even now, the water is never truly still. It waits quietly for the next remembering. The waters have finally calmed. The roar of the flood softens into whispering waves, and the planet, washed clean of its memories, rests beneath a sky reborn. From the silence, humanity emerges again, not as conqueror, but as a listener. They walk upon land that was once sea, carrying with them fragments of stories, songs of the world that drowned. And then they begin to build. But what they build is unlike anything that came before. Across continents, in places separated by oceans and time, rise monuments so vast, so precise, that even today we stand before them in disbelief. In the high plains of Bolivia, where the air is thin and the light cuts like glass, lies Pumapunku, a field of shattered stones, each one carved with angles and edges as sharp as if cut by a modern machine. Blocks of andesite and diorite, harder than steel, fitted together so perfectly that not even a sheet of paper can slip between them. Some weigh more than 100 tons. Some bear grooves, channels, and interlocking joints that defy the tools we believe the ancients possessed. Who built this place? And why? To the people of the Andes, these were the works of the gods, the first ones, the Viracocha, who emerged from the waters after the great darkness, bringing light and knowledge. But to the modern eye, the question still lingers like incense in the air. Could this truly be the work of primitive hands, or are we looking at the fingerprints of something older, a memory of a civilization erased by the flood? Half a world away, on a mountain in Lebanon, another enigma waits. Baalbek. There, beneath Roman temples and ruined columns, lies a foundation of stone blocks so immense they seem to mock the idea of gravity itself. The largest of them, the so-called Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighs over 1,000 tons. No modern crane could move it. And yet, there it sits, cut, shaped, placed with purpose, as though the earth itself had been persuaded to yield. The ancients did not build small, they built for eternity. They did not think in decades or dynasties, but in epochs. Perhaps they understood something we have forgotten. That stone is the only language the planet will always remember. Fire erases, water forgets, but stone endures. Maybe these colossal structures were not meant merely as temples or tombs, but as messages. Letters carved for the future, written in the syntax of weight and symmetry. Messages meant to survive not just time, but cataclysm. When you stand among the ruins of Pumapunku, you can feel it. A strange stillness, as though the stones themselves are alive, whispering across millennia. Every groove, every cut seems less like craftsmanship and more like remembrance. It is as if the builders were saying, "We remember what was lost, we remember who we were, and we will not let the earth forget again." Even their precision feels symbolic, an act of defiance against chaos. For to carve perfection out of the hardest rock is to declare mastery over impermanence. Each edge is a prayer, each weight a vow that humanity can endure. The stones of Baalbek echo the same vow. There, among the mountains, the wind carries a deep hum, the vibration of time itself moving through granite. If you listen closely, it feels as though the earth is remembering the hands that once shaped her. Whoever these ancient engineers were, they understood not just architecture, but resonance. Their monuments align with the heavens. Their stones sing under certain frequencies. Their geometry mirrors the movements of stars. It is engineering as invocation, a merging of science and spirit. Perhaps they believed that by building such structures, they could anchor the human story against the next great forgetting. And perhaps in their silence, they succeeded. Because even now, thousands of years later, we still ask their questions. We still stand beneath their stones, feeling small and awed, and wonder, how? Why? Who were you? Maybe that was their intention, to awaken wonder, to remind every generation that follows of the mystery at the heart of existence. You see, monuments like Pumapunku and Baalbek are not just relics. They are mirrors. When we look upon them, we do not see the past. We see our own reflection in the eyes of eternity. The precision of those cuts, the weight of those stones, the quiet endurance of their symmetry, all speak of a philosophy that what is worth remembering must be carved into the bones of the world. Perhaps that is what immortality truly means. Not living forever, but leaving behind something that even oceans cannot erase. In that sense, the ancient engineers were not builders. They were storytellers, writing in the dialect of stone. And though their names are gone, their message remains as clear and as haunting as ever. We were here, we knew, and we built to be remembered. From the ruins of their craft, we inherit not just their mystery, but their invitation to remember that creation itself is sacred, that every act of making is also an act of defiance against time. As the wind moves across the high plateaus, you can almost feel their presence still, not as gods, not as myths, but as echoes of ourselves, builders who dreamed of permanence in a world that forever changes. The flood may have taken their cities, but not their voice. Because their voice was made of stone, and stone remembers. And so, from the drowned continents and forgotten temples, we move now toward the next mystery, toward the legends of the teachers, the bearers of light who came after the flood, the ones the ancients called Viracocha, Thoth, Quetzalcoatl, Oannes, the messengers from the sea who carried knowledge from the old world to the new. The flood erased, the engineers rebuilt, but it was the teachers who restored the flame. The stones remember, and the wind moves gently across them, carrying the faint echo of voices that once spoke in forgotten tongues. The age of builders has passed, the monument stands silent under a new sky, and the floodwaters, once a raging god, have finally withdrawn. The world is quiet again. The earth breathes softly, and from the endless line of the sea, they appear. No one knows from where. Perhaps from islands that no longer exist, perhaps from the remnants of a drowned continent, or perhaps from that thin place between myth and memory where history is born. They came not as conquerors, but as teachers. Their presence was calm, their knowledge luminous, their timing perfect. In the Andes, they called him Viracocha, the bearded one, clothed in white, who emerged from the Western Ocean after the Great Flood. He walked among the people, teaching them how to shape stone, how to count the stars, how to plant and harvest with the rhythm of the sun. And when his work was done, he promised to return, and disappeared once more, walking across the waters. Across the world, in Central America, another name was whispered, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a teacher of wisdom, peace, and craft. He too was said to have come from the east, from beyond the sea. He built temples, taught astronomy, and forbade human sacrifice. When the time came to depart, he too vowed to return, and vanished toward the horizon into the morning star. Far away in Mesopotamia, the cradle of later civilizations, a figure called Oannes rose each dawn from the sea, half man, half fish, bearing the gifts of writing, architecture, and law. He spoke to humans during the day and returned to the depths each night, as if his home was the memory of the ocean itself. And in Egypt there was Thoth, the ibis-headed keeper of knowledge, the scribe of the gods, the master of measure and word. He taught men how to record time, to weigh truth, to write the language that endures beyond death. And in India, ancient texts tell of Manu, the one who survived the flood, guided by divine warning to build a vessel that carried the seeds of a new humanity. When the waters fell, he too emerged and began to teach. 5 names, 5 continents, 5 memories of light returning after darkness. Different stories, but one pattern. After the flood, teachers came from the sea. To the people who met them, they must have seemed divine. To modern eyes, they seem impossibly similar, too similar to be coincidence. Perhaps they were not gods at all. Perhaps they were the last survivors of the old world, bearers of the lost flame of civilization. They came ashore not to rule, but to rebuild. Imagine what they must have seen. A planet reborn but raw, the ruins of cities beneath the waves, tribes wandering through forests that had once been harbors, the sky still carrying the scent of salt and ash. They must have known that if they did not act, the knowledge of their ancestors, the mathematics, the astronomy, the art of shaping the earth, would vanish forever. So they became myths, they became stories, because story was the only vessel left that could survive time. They taught the survivors how to count the days, how to find the solstice, how to carve stone to mark the stars. And slowly, in scattered valleys and mountains, a new humanity began to remember itself. Every civilization that followed, Sumer, Egypt, the Maya, the Indus, carried echoes of that first instruction, as if each culture was a spark rekindled from the same buried flame. We call them civilizing gods, but perhaps that is only how memory speaks when it forgets the flesh of its teachers. Perhaps the truth is simpler and more human. These were the messengers of continuity, the ones who refused to let the story end. They carried with them not just tools or words, but the understanding that knowledge itself is sacred, that to build, to measure, to record is to remember. And maybe that is why their stories always end the same way, with departure. They never stayed. They walked back into the ocean, into the mist, into legend, as if returning to the library from which they came. Because their purpose was never to rule, it was to awaken. Today, as we trace their footsteps through myth and stone, we are haunted by their silence. What did they know that we have forgotten? Why did they leave? And are they truly gone, or merely waiting for us to listen again? There is something almost celestial about their pattern. The flood, destruction, the builders, endurance, the teachers, resurrection. Like the phases of a cosmic rhythm, the pulse of creation moving through ages. When we speak of Viracocha or Thoth or Quetzalcoatl, we are not really talking about individuals. We are talking about archetypes of remembrance, manifestations of the human instinct to preserve meaning in the face of oblivion. They are the dream of continuity made flesh for a brief moment so that knowledge could cross the bridge of catastrophe. Even now, the sea still holds their mystery. It moves as they once did, quiet, reflective, eternal. Each wave a syllable of the same story, how light returns after darkness. If you stand by the shore at twilight, you might sense it, that faint, familiar pulse beneath the horizon, a whisper older than words, a promise older than history. Perhaps they are still there, in some hidden corner of the earth, watching as we too approach our own flood, waiting to return once again when the waters rise. Because that is what the teachers from the sea have always done. They come when the world forgets itself. They bring back the fire, and they remind us that civilization is not the story of invention, but the story of remembrance. The flood washed the world clean. The stones preserved the silence, and from the edge of the ocean, the teachers returned, to whisper once more the first words of the human song. Night falls upon the new world. The oceans have quieted, the teachers have gone back to the sea, but what they left behind was the hunger to remember. Humanity looked upward, to the stars that had witnessed the flood, the same cold lights that had watched fire fall and water rise. And in that vastness, they saw not chaos, but order. Patterns, paths of return, they began to draw, first upon sand, then upon stone. Each mark, a way of saying, "We see you now," each temple, an echo of the constellations above. The heavens became the first map, and the earth, its mirror. Across deserts and continents, this quiet obsession took shape. In Egypt, beneath the blazing sun, 3 pyramids rose from the plateau of Giza, their alignment not random but precise as music. The belt of Orion, 3 stars in the hunter's waist, reflected upon the ground in perfect symmetry, as above so below. To the priests of the Nile, this was no accident. It was a promise that the souls of kings would ascend through that celestial corridor, following the same stars that once guided the gods. Even in death, they would find their way home by geometry. Far to the north, on an island wrapped in fog, great stones stood like sentinels. Stonehenge. Its arches framed the sun's journey across the seasons. At the solstice, light pierced through the lintels with mathematical grace, marking the return of summer, the rebirth of life. It was calendar, compass, and prayer woven into one. When the morning light touched those stones, the earth and the sky became one breath. And far away in the tropical heart of Asia, another pattern was laid down. Angkor Wat, a temple so vast it seems to float between realms. Its towers mirror the constellation Draco, the dragon that circles the North Pole, guardian of the celestial axis. When the night is clear, you can trace the curve of the dragon in the sky and see it reflected in the stones below, as if the builders had caught a fragment of the universe and nailed it to the earth. Everywhere you look, Peru, Cambodia, Egypt, England, the The same conversation was unfolding. Across thousands of years and thousands of miles, different voices, same question. How do we make the infinite visible? These ancient architects did not simply worship the sky. They translated it. They believed that to forget the stars was to lose our place in the cosmos. So they etched the universe into stone, turning the planet itself into a memory device, a celestial archive. When you stand at Giza and look up at Orion, or when you stand at Stonehenge and watch the sun rise through the arc of the stones, you are seeing not religion, but continuity. It is the same gesture repeated through ages, the gesture of humans refusing to forget where they came from. Perhaps they believed that as long as the stars were remembered, the world would not drown again. Perhaps they knew that what the flood erased on the surface, the sky preserved in pattern. So they copied the pattern down, not on paper, but on planet. Think of it as cosmic insurance, a way of reminding the Earth of its own design. When future civilizations look back, the message would still be there. The universe is written in you. Even today, our modern cities echo those ancient maps. Our skyscrapers rise toward the same constellations. Our satellites trace the same celestial routes. We are still mirroring the sky, whether we know it or not. Perhaps this is what the teachers from the sea meant to show us before they vanished, that civilization is not about power or control, but about alignment. To build in harmony with the heavens is to build in truth. Look again at the pyramids, the henges, the temples. Do you see how they breathe with the earth? Do you feel the gravity of their stillness, the patience of their precision? They are not ruins. They are mirrors, still catching the light of stars that died thousands of years ago, so that we might remember them still. Each stone is a note in a song we are only beginning to hear again. A song that says, "You are part of something vast. You were never alone. You have always been connected." And so, when the night falls and the stars burn above you, remember that our ancestors once stood beneath this same sky, carving its shape into the bones of the earth, so that even if we forgot the words, we would still remember the music. For they understood a truth we are only rediscovering now, that the universe is not something out there to be mapped and measured. It is something we carry within us. The temples, then, were not just observatories. They were mirrors of the soul. And through them, the earth was able to speak to the sky, and the sky to whisper back. The night of constellations begins to fade. Stone remembers what the sky has sung, and as dawn gathers at the edges of the world, we turn from the heavens back to the earth itself, to rock, to clay, to the long, patient ledger of geology. For if the stars gave us a map of belonging, the earth now offers testimony. Not belief, but strata. Not legend, but layers. And in those layers is a refrain so steady, so widespread, it feels like the planet's own memory speaking at last. There were floods. Not streams misbehaving, not rivers in seasonal anger, but walls of water that outran the wind, that scoured valleys to bone, that peeled continents the way a storm peels bark from a tree. Listen, from North America to Siberia, from Iceland to the Indian Ocean, the land repeats a single story. In the American Northwest, the channeled Scablands brood under a high blue sky. Dry coulees stretch like abandoned avenues. Gravel bars big as hills lie where no river flows. And there, an impossible cliff, dry falls, a fossil waterfall wider than anything living water now dares. You can stand upon that edge and feel your heartbeat measure time, because only a flood could have written such scale into stone. Not 1,000 years of trickle, not 1,000,000 years of patience. But days, when glacial Lake Missoula broke its ice dam and sent a sea racing west, fast as a storm front, loud as a sky on fire. In those days, the Earth learned how quickly memory can be erased. Cross the ocean in the mind, drift north toward the Arctic breath, and hear another verse of the same song. In the Altai Mountains of Siberia, giant ripple fields, wave after stone wave, curl across the plains. Not ripples you can trace with your hand, but ripples you must climb, each crest the height of a house. They point downstream like arrows left by a god in retreat, a record of meltwater released in a single terrifying exhale. Turn to Iceland, where ice still keeps counsel with fire. There a word survives, Jökulhlaup, a glacial outburst flood. You can watch a smaller version happen even now. A subglacial lake warms or shifts, ice gives way, and a sudden river roars across black basalt, rearranging the map between sunrise and sunset. Iceland is the workshop where water still practices catastrophe, reminding us that what we call extreme is, to the planet, merely a mood. Farther west, where Britain parts from Europe, the English Channel holds the ghost of a violent birth. Sonar surveys sketch a submerged canyon, a drowned highway cut by a flood that tore through the chalk gate between island and continent. Once there was land, then there was not. To those who watched the sea spill through that breach, the world itself must have felt severed, not metaphor, but geography, a homeland split by water's will. Head north again, and the Storega slide off Norway whispers its deep water secret. A submarine landslide, an entire mountainside of seafloor collapsing, sending tsunamis rolling toward coasts that had no word for such a wave. On old peatlands, salt crept in and stayed, and the soil remembered what the people could not afford to forget. The sea can stand up and walk inland. Now let the mind unspool south and east until the map warms beneath your feet. In the Indian Ocean, stories cross like currents, islands that sank in a night, coasts that stepped backward, cultures that became sailors because land was no longer trustworthy. Along the old Sunda shelf, Sunda land, ribboned riverbeds lie in perfect silence beneath shallow seas. They look like nervous systems fossilized in blue, an anatomy of a drowned continent. And in the Black Sea, sediment cores lift thin pages of time to the light. Freshwater life, then suddenly salt. A line as sharp as a blade, perhaps a rising Mediterranean spilled over a narrow sill, or perhaps something more complex unfolded, but the mud records a conversion. Lake to sea, home to horizon. To those on the shore, it would not have read as Holocene transition. It would have read as judgment, a boundary redrawn by a hand no one could see. In each of these places, the evidence speaks a dialect of certainty. Floods, plural, not one. Scales unfriendly to the tidy comfort of slow change. Not a rejection of time's patience, but an amendment, a note in the margin that says sometimes the earth moves by crescendo. And we, habitual makers of story, held that crescendo in our mouths until it turned to myth. Because when you live through a world that drowns, you do not draw a cross-section. You remember in symbols. You say, a god grew angry, because what else do you call a wall of water taller than a forest? You say, the serpent thrashed, because the river moved like a living thing. You say, the sea came to the door, because one morning it did. Geology and myth, then, are not enemies. They are different tempos of the same song. Rock takes the low notes, long, sustaining, inaudible, until you lean your ear to the ground. Human voices carry the melody, urgent, fearful, beautiful, trying to outrun forgetting. From North America to Siberia, from Iceland to the Indian Ocean, the refrain remains. Catastrophic floods have swept this planet, and when they pass, they do not only move soil, they move memory. They sand away the edges of our archives. The villages where stories were told, the fields where ancestors taught the names of stars, the thresholds where a language learned to pronounce the world. A flood does not topple a library. It simply removes the building from the conversation. Walk out onto any modern shoreline at low tide. Listen, the hiss you hear is not just water negotiating with sand. It is the soft abrasion of what was against what is. In that sound live Doggerland's fires, Sunderland's markets, coasts whose names have not been spoken in 10,000 years. We do not hear them as words, we hear them as a feeling, the sudden, unreasonable longing that salt air brings. And yet the story is not sorrow alone. The earth is not a villain. Floods are not verdicts, they are breaths. In-out, glacial lock, ocean release. To mistake a planet's respiration for malice is to miss the larger wonder. That life persists by learning to carry memory differently each time. Perhaps that is why the oldest living archives were built on high ground. The hill sanctuaries, the desert monoliths, the mountainside platforms, places that keep their heads above the tide. Perhaps that is why the sky became a ledger. When the land could be redrafted without notice, the stars kept their appointments. So we taught stones to point upward, and in pointing, to remember. But stones alone do not speak. Someone must listen. This is where geology and the human heart entwine. To read the scabens is to imagine the roar that carved them, to supply from our own breath the sound long vanished. To read the Storega tsunamis in peat is to picture a cold morning, a father turning toward the sea at the wrong instant. To read the drowned rivers of Sunderland is to understand why some stories begin in boats. And so the circle completes itself, temple to star, star to stone, stone to layer, layer to story. Each medium tries to hold what water would otherwise remove. Each is a raft. Even now, in an age of satellites and models, the old rhythm returns in subtler dress. Ice retreating from mountains, coasts revising their lines by a finger's width each year. We measure it in millimeters and feel safe, until we remember that the difference between a drip and a deluge is not morality, but tempo. This is not a sermon, it is an invitation. To look at the map not as a boundary, but as a palimpsest. To see coastlines as annotations, not absolutes. To recognize in the long grammar of the earth that commas can be carved by floods. When we speak of a great flood, we are not shrinking the past to a single calamity. We are acknowledging a pattern that spans latitudes, a chorus sung in many keys, Missoula's roar, Altai's ripples, Iceland's rushing word, the Channel's torn gate, Norway's walking sea, Sunda's drowned braids, the Black Sea's sudden salt. Different verses, one song. And if the song feels familiar, it is because our bodies are archives too. We are largely water, and water has always known the way back to itself. Perhaps that is why flood stories comfort even as they frighten. They remind us that endings can also be translations. So let us step gently from this chapter. Our ears tuned now to the bass note underfoot, and follow the echo where it leads. To the moment when a single geologist stood in a hostile room and said quietly, "Floods did this." He was met with laughter at first, because myth is tolerated until it enters the laboratory. But the land does not laugh, it only waits to be read correctly, and that is where we go next. From the global scars of water to the courage of recognition, from the chorus of continents to the single human voice that said what rock already knew. The earth has finished speaking for now. Her stories lie quiet in stone, in ripple marks in canyons, in valleys wide enough to swallow imagination. And for a long time, no one listened. Civilization grew restless again. We traded the silence of rivers for the hum of engines, the patience of mountains for the certainty of textbooks. We told ourselves that the planet changed slowly, imperceptibly, politely. Floods belonged to fable, and cataclysm to the theater of gods. The earth, we decided, was gentle, predictable, tamed, but truth waits. Sometimes for centuries, sometimes for a single stubborn soul. In the early years of the 20th century, a man named J. Harlan Bretz walked into that waiting silence. He was a geologist from the Pacific Northwest, curious, deliberate, and inconveniently unafraid of ridicule. He wandered the broken lands of Washington state, where canyons ran without rivers, where cliffs curved like frozen waves, and boulders the size of houses lay scattered as though dropped by a passing hand. Everywhere he looked, the land defied explanation. It was as if something enormous had passed through, a flood so vast it seemed impossible. But impossibility, he thought, is only the name we give to what we have forgotten. So Bretz began to measure, to walk, to map. He traced the scars of vanished torrents, followed channels that began and ended in nowhere, and stood before dry falls. A fossil waterfall 5 kilometers wide, taller than Niagara, and utterly without water. What could carve such enormity? He saw it plainly. Not time, but catastrophe. A flood of unimaginable scale, rushing with the power of inland seas, tearing across the land when an ice dam burst and the waters of glacial Lake Missoula exploded free. It was not theory. It was evidence, written in the grammar of erosion. When Bretz presented his findings in 1923, the room laughed. Scientists, proud keepers of the steady earth, shook their heads. A single man, they said, could not rewrite the laws of geology. Uniformity was gospel. The earth moved by inches, not by tempests. But Bretz did not argue. He returned to the field. He trusted the land more than applause, and the land kept telling him the same story. Year after year, he walked it like scripture. He gathered photographs, samples, maps, a pilgrim of the planet's forgotten violence. Decades passed. Then satellites came, and from above, the truth became undeniable. The patterns were clear. Canyons braided like rivers frozen mid-breath, scablins etched by torrents too vast for imagination. The laughter stopped. Science had caught up to myth. The flood, once dismissed as metaphor, had left its fingerprint visible from space. The impossible had become evidence. The ridicule had become revelation. J. Harlan Bretz lived long enough to see the world apologize. In 1979, at 96 years old, he received geology's highest honor. When asked what it felt like to be vindicated, he smiled and said, "It feels very good to be right." And perhaps somewhere deep beneath that smile, the earth smiled with him. Because what Bretz proved was larger than floods. He proved that myth can be memory, and memory can be science. That the stories carved in rock and whispered by ancestors were never enemies of reason. Only languages we had forgotten how to translate. When we call ancient tales superstition, perhaps we are only hearing them in the wrong key. Perhaps the story of Noah or Utnapishtim or Manu was not fiction at all, but witness. The only record that survived a catastrophe too vast for numbers. And isn't that the oldest rhythm of our species? To survive disaster, then wrap its lesson in story, so the next generation will listen, even if they no longer believe. In Bretz's story, we see the circle close. The myths of the flood meeting the mathematics of erosion, the symbols of gods meeting the strata of geology. It is as if the planet itself waited for us to mature enough to recognize her handwriting. Science had not disproved legend, it had rediscovered it. And what a gentle, humbling truth that is, that all our instruments, all our calculations only lead us back to the same place our ancestors began, the wonder before the storm. When the flood myths speak of divine anger, perhaps they mean pressure and melt. When they speak of the world cleansed, perhaps they mean renewal. And when they speak of survival, perhaps they mean what science now confirms, that life, though fragile, is astonishingly persistent. The earth does not lie, she only speaks slowly. And now that we have learned to listen, we begin to hear the harmony again. Myth and data, faith and fact, singing the same song in different octaves. So let us not mock the ancients for their gods, nor the scientists for their measurements. Both are forms of reverence. Both are attempts to remember. For in the end, every discovery is a kind of homecoming, a recognition that the stories we once told to explain the world were not foolish at all, but fragments of a truth too large for a single language. Bretz did not invent that truth. He simply gave it new vocabulary. He reminded us that the earth can move in leaps, that the past is capable of shouting. He turned disbelief into listening. And he showed us what every myth has been waiting to reveal, that the line between story and science is as thin and as sacred as the edge of a wave. The laughter of science has faded into understanding. The flood has long receded. But on the far side of that silence, across the ruins and the centuries, something remains. The human will to be remembered. Every civilization, no matter how humble or grand, has feared the same enemy: forgetting. Empires crumble, languages vanish, but the impulse to leave a mark, to say, "We were here," is as old as the first heartbeat. After the waters rose and the fire cooled, after the sky quieted and the world began again, those who survived did something extraordinary. They did not simply rebuild. They testified. At Göbekli Tepe, they carved circles of stone so vast and deliberate that even time itself would hesitate before erasing them. They filled the air with geometry. Pillars shaped like human beings, hands folded across their bodies, eyes gazing toward the horizon of eternity. And then, with reverence or fear, they buried it all. They sealed their own monument beneath the earth, as if to protect it from the next forgetting, to hide it not from enemies, but from oblivion. At Baalbek, they reached for heaven itself. In the mountains of Lebanon, blocks of stone, the weight of dreams, were cut, shaped, and lifted into place, each one a silent defiance of impermanence. 1,000 tons of testimony. No tools we know of could have moved them, and yet there they stand, as if gravity had once been persuaded by faith. You can feel it even now, the echo of hands that built with hope stronger than logic. And on the windswept plains of Bolivia, at Pumapunku, they carved into the hardest rock on earth, andesite and diorite, stones so sharp-edged and interlocked that not even the centuries can loosen their grip. Each cut, each corner, a line in a language no one alive can read. It is not architecture. It is remembrance turned to matter. When you walk among these stones, you feel something strange. A stillness that hums, a silence that watches. It is as if the builders are still there, breathing beneath the rock, waiting for us to finally understand the message they left behind. Because these were not monuments to gods. They were messages to the future. Each temple, each monolith is a prayer carved for us, for those who would come after. A plea that says, "Do not let the memory drown again. Do not forget that we once knew the stars, that we once walked with understanding." They must have sensed the cycles, the rhythm of fire and flood, rise and fall, building and forgetting. Perhaps they knew it would all happen again. And so they built not to survive, but to be found. Their architecture became their language. Their stones became their voice. Every groove and alignment, every impossible weight was not decoration, it was intention. They could not stop the flood, but they could leave behind a map of what it meant to live before it. And in that act, they achieved something divine, to be remembered, even after death. Think of it, 12,000 years of wind and rain, empires born and gone, religions rising and fading like tides, and still these stones endure. Still, they whisper. Perhaps that is what immortality truly is. Not eternal life, but a memory that refuses to be washed away. Maybe that is why every civilization after them built with such obsession for scale and symmetry. Egypt, Sumer, the Maya, the Khmer, each one echoing the same desire, to make something that time could not digest, to create monuments that would stand like anchors against the drifting of history. When you look at Göbekli Tepe, Baalbek, or Pumapunku, you are not just looking at ruins. You are looking at the human condition, our need to be known, to tell the universe, I remember, therefore I am. And in that way, those ancient engineers and sculptors were not different from us. They built in stone what we now build in data. They reached for permanence in a world that never stops changing. And perhaps one day, our own monuments, our cities, our satellites, our archives will be nothing more than sediment, and someone will dig them up and ask, who were they? And in that question, we will live again. The ones who refused to be forgotten did not seek glory. They sought connection, a bridge across extinction, and somehow across 10,000 years they succeeded. Because here we are, still speaking their names, still standing in awe beneath their impossible stones, still tracing their geometry with trembling fingers as if touching the edge of a lost truth. Perhaps this is what they wanted all along. Not worship, not monuments, but remembrance. To be a part of the eternal conversation between earth and sky, between memory and silence. At Göbekli Tepe, they buried their wisdom so that it would survive. At Baalbek, they anchored mountains into place. At Pumapunku, they shaped the unshapable. Each one a note in the same symphony, a plea sung across millennia. When the waters rise again, remember us. Remember that we once stood here, reaching upward. The world will flood again, not perhaps with water, but with forgetting. And when that tide comes, may these stones be our lifeboats. May their silence remind us that knowledge must be tended like a flame, or else it too will drown. They built for the ones who would someday find them. And tonight, that is us. We are the fulfillment of their prayer. The listeners, the rememberers. The torch they lit in stone still burns quietly in our curiosity. And as long as we keep asking who they will never be gone. The stones have spoken. Their plea, remember us, still lingers in the air like incense. And as the echo fades, another awareness rises. Quiet, patient, older than any monument, time itself is breathing. We are taught in classrooms bright with fluorescent certainty that history marches forward, arrows straight, progress bound, a line from darkness to light. But the ancients did not draw straight lines. They drew circles. They spoke of ages, of a golden age when truth and beauty walked openly among us, slipping by degrees into silver, then bronze, and at last iron, where noise grows louder than wisdom and memory grows thin. They told of Yuga, great wheels of time turning through Satya, Treta, Dvapara, Kali, a descending arc, not toward doom but toward renewal, because every winter is a preparation for spring. They sang of Ragnarok, the twilight not of everything but of an era. Fire and flood cleansing the stage so that life may enter again, differently, tenderly, bravely. Across oceans and language families, they whispered the same refrain, history is a circle, not a road. And each civilization, Sumer to Maya, Nile to Andes, is a single inhalation, a long exhale, a pause in which the world remembers what it has always known. Listen, the Earth's heart has a rhythm. Ice advances, ice retreats, forests burn, forests seed. Seas rise, seas fall back like a tide of thought. Even the sky turns upon a greater wheel, the slow procession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year breath we can neither see nor stop, only honor. When the ancients built their calendars in stone, they were not merely counting days. They were synchronizing with a pulse, asking to be held by something vast and lawful. A circle stilled the mind. A circle told them, this too returns. To think in cycles is to think with humility. It is to accept that our moment is not the summit, but a season. That wisdom does not vanish, it goes underground. That after fire, water, after water, silence, after silence, song. It is to know that forgetting is not failure. It is part of remembering. Modern time can feel like a tight wire. We balance upon it with greedy feet, afraid to look down or back. But ancient time is a shore. Waves arrive, waves withdraw. Each one different, each one the same. And you, standing there, begin to understand that stability is not the absence of change, but fidelity to the rhythm. When the golden age darkens, we grieve. The songs soften, the tools grow blunt, our temples crack where meaning once stood guard. But the elders nod, for they know, decline is a teacher. It lowers the light so we notice the stars. It closes one school so the next generation will seek a better one within. In Kali Yuga, the age of noise, truth whispers instead of shouting. It hides in small places. It prefers a kitchen lamp to a colonnade, a well-told story to a law. Here, wisdom becomes portable. It lives in proverbs and lullabies, in rituals that seem quaint until the flood comes and only memory can swim. The Norse imagined the worlds upon a tree, roots deep, branches high, each realm a fruit ripening according to its turn. When winter comes, the tree does not die, it concentrates. So too do civilizations. They shed what is bright and heavy and keep what is small and living. A spark, a seed, a name. What looks like ruin from outside may be conservation from within. The Maya counted not just years but bactons, epochs as beads upon a string. Each bead is carved with jaguars and maize, eclipses and rain. Not a prophecy of catastrophe, a choreography of return. When one count ends, another begins, not because the world collapses, but because meaning needs a new container. We grow uneasy with circles, we moderns. A circle has no finish line to cross, no summit selfie to prove we arrived. But consider the heart. Does it apologize for repeating itself? Would you ask it to beat only once, then be done? Repetition is not stagnation, it is fidelity to life. Each cycle is the same lesson taught in a new dialect to students who did not exist the last time it was offered. Perhaps this is why every culture keeps a symbol of return, the Ouroboros swallowing its tail, the phoenix rising from its ash, the serpent shedding what once fit and now binds. The universe is not a tale told once, it is an art practiced forever. So what becomes of progress in a world of circles? It becomes humility with direction. Progress is not the denial of return, it is the quality of our next passage. We cannot prevent the season from changing, but we can choose how we meet it. We can enter winter with a store of wood and a store of stories. We can welcome spring without arrogance, planting not as conquerors, but as stewards who remember the price of green. The ancients, who watched ages wax and wane, did not always name their teachers, but their work betrays their knowledge. They aligned stones with solstice not because they feared the dark, but because they wanted to greet it like a guest. They built on hills because water loves the low. They taught their children the sky so that when the archives drowned, the constellations would still pronounce the calendar. In a straight-line world, failure is fatal. In a cyclical world, failure is tuition. When a city falls, its stones do not stop speaking. They sink into the tongues of those who pass over them. A myth changes costume and walks on. A technology is remembered as right, then rediscovered as science when the instruments are ready. This is not regression, it is recursion, a spiral that returns without repeating exactly, like a melody that finds a deeper octave. The flood myths, Noah and Utnapishtim, Manu and Deucalion, do not describe the end of the world. They describe the end of a world and the handover to another. The ark is not just a boat, it is any vessel that carries memory across water. A temple can be an ark, a story can be an ark. A child's attentive mind, bright, absorbent, unafraid, can be the finest ark of all. When we say, history repeats, we risk cynicism. But when the elders say, history returns, they mean, be ready to recognize the visitor. A visitor is not a thief, it is a test. Will you greet fire with fear or with lessons learned? Will you answer flood with towers alone, or with high-ground communities that remember to welcome strangers who have lost their maps? The mind that sees only lines asks, how do we stop the cycle? The heart that knows circles asks, how do we tend the cycle? Stopping is violence to rhythm. Tending is harmony with it. This is why civilizations place their wisdom not only in libraries, but in habits. Habits survive when shelves do not. Kindness survives. Craft survives. The way a community eats together, sings together, stays at the bedside together, these are circular technologies. They keep turning when the power does not. From the golden age to iron, from Satya to Kali, from dawn to dusk and back again, the message is steady. Do not mistake the dimming for the end of light. Dusk enables stars. Winter rehearses roots. The silence after the storm is not absence, it is space, for counting what remains, for choosing what to carry forward. And what do we carry? Not everything. To carry everything is to drown on dry land. We carry principles that do not age, reverence for truth, grounded work, care for the smallest flame. We carry practices that grow stronger under pressure, attention, gratitude, repair. We carry maps that the sea cannot swallow, the sky's slow wheel, the memory of high places, the knowledge that generosity is architecture. One day our monuments will be ruins. Our algorithms will be jokes told by the wind. But if we have taught our children to listen for the rhythm, they will not be poor. They will stand at the edge of a changed world and recognize the tide. They will know how to build arcs of many kinds: stone, story, seed, song. This is why the ancients kept singing even when the harvest failed. Why they lit lamps at the darkest hinge of the year. Why they walked the long road to a standing stone to watch a thin blade of dawn thread a doorway that had waited all winter for this one moment. Proof that the circle holds, that nothing essential is lost, only transformed. History is not a straight line. It is a breathing, in of knowledge, out of certainty, in of humility, out of hubris. If you listen closely, you can hear the planet's chest rise and fall. You can feel your own breath match it. And in that synchronization, fear loosens its grip. You understand, we are not failing, we are returning. The question then is not whether the circle will turn, it will. The question is, what will we remember next time? Will we build only higher or wiser? Will we treat the oceans as vaults of our earliest chapters, or as strangers to be fenced? Will we scorn the myth because it does not show its work, or will we read it as a letter from those who survived and wanted us to? We stand now where many have stood, between cycles, between certainties. Behind us the plea etched in stone, do not forget us. Before us the horizon, unmapped, irresistible. Our task is simple in words and difficult in practice. Carry the flame without burning the library. Carry the memory without freezing the future. And so we end this turn of the circle not with triumph, but with tenderness. For those who came before, for those who are arriving, for the fragile, faithful rhythm that holds us all. From here, we will descend into the practical art of remembrance, how teachers become traditions, how rituals become resilience, how a scattered people fashions a common star to steer by. The line has become a loop. The loop has become a lifeline. The circle turns again. The flood has come and gone. Civilizations have risen, fallen, and left their whispers in stone. And somewhere between memory and myth, a question keeps returning, as persistent as the tide. What world came before the flood? Every culture keeps a ghost of it, a golden land that drowned not in sin but in sorrow, a civilization so radiant, so complete, that its disappearance feels like the first heartbreak of humanity. They called it Atlantis. Others whispered Mu. In the south of India, the Tamil poets mourned Kumari Kandam, a lost cradle of wisdom swallowed by the sea. These are not merely names, they are coordinates of yearning. They mark not places on a map, but places in our collective soul. The ache for a time when human beings still spoke the language of the earth. Atlantis, the word itself is like a wave, rising, breaking, retreating, forever returning to shore. First told by Plato, in dialogues that read like confession and warning both. He spoke of a vast island beyond the pillars of Heracles, rich with temples and canals, its people mighty in science and spirit, until pride made them deaf to the laws of balance. Then, in a single day and night of misfortune, the sea rose and took it all. For millennia, scholars have searched for it, under the Atlantic, in the Mediterranean, beneath the ice of Antarctica. Each theory, each expedition, is less about geography than about hope. The hope that the world once knew how to live wisely, and that we might remember how. The story of Mu tells the same sorrow in a different tongue. In the Pacific, legends speak of great lands where the sun rises, civilizations with star maps and crystal towers, their wisdom carried away by the sea when the earth tilted on its axis. Long before satellites, the Polynesians spoke of ancestors who navigated by stars older than any written chart, as if memory itself could steer across time. And far to the south, beneath the Indian Ocean, the Tamil bards sang of Kumari Kandam, a land where rivers once flowed from mountain to sea, where poets and kings studied the movements of the stars until a great deluge erased it from the earth. Yet the songs survived, woven into the Sangam literature, like a fragment of a dream that refuses to fade at dawn. Different oceans, different tongues, same grief. Each myth is a scar on the same wound, a remembrance of something vast that preceded the world we know, a continent of mind, if not of matter, a homeland that exists not in rock and soil, but in the architecture of memory itself. Perhaps Atlantis and Mu and Kumari Kandam were never coordinates on a globe, but coordinates of consciousness. The last collective memory of a species before the sea rewrote its story. When the waters rose, the continents may have drowned, but the longing did not. It drifted ashore in the dreams of poets, the rituals of temples, the designs of cities built as if trying to remember something larger. You can feel it in the way ancient sites echo each other. Pyramids in Egypt, in Mexico, in China, stone circles in Britain, and in the Sahara. Myths of floods, of stars, of teachers from the sea, repeating, overlapping, as if drawn from a shared source deeper than distance. Maybe the continents were real. Maybe they were metaphors, or maybe both truths meet halfway, where geology and psyche entwine. For memory too has tectonic plates. It shifts, collides, subducts, until whole civilizations sink beneath the waves of forgetting. But their pressure remains, and when the right fault line opens, their stories rise again, not as land, but as revelation. The lost continents are not lost. They are remembering themselves through us, through every temple aligned to a vanished star, through every myth of fire and flood that refuses to die, through every quiet question whispered at the edge of the sea. Where did it all begin? Plato said Atlantis fell because it forgot humility. The earth perhaps remembers humility better than we do. It teaches it in tides. Every rise follows a fall. Every fall prepares a rise. Even the continents, those ancient bones of the planet, move with the rhythm of repentance, drifting, colliding, parting, returning. So maybe the myth of Atlantis is not a warning, but a mirror. It shows us the cost of forgetting balance and the promise of beginning again. When you stand by the ocean and look toward the horizon, you are looking across time as much as space. Beneath those waters, in the darkness no sonar can fully pierce, the planet keeps its archives, stone tablets written in fault lines, inscriptions of pressure and pause. And if we listen not with instruments but with imagination, we may hear a low, endless chant. Remember the worlds before you, for you are one of them. Atlantis, Mu, Kumari Kandam. They are not myths of loss. They are memories of continuity. They remind us that knowledge and compassion must travel light enough to float. They remind us that we have drowned before, and we will rise again, each time a little wiser, each time a little more willing to listen. The continents may shift, the oceans may claim their due, but the human spirit, that strange and stubborn flame, keeps swimming toward the light. So if the maps show nothing where those lands should be, perhaps it is because they were never meant to be found. Perhaps they were meant to be remembered. For remembrance is the true geography of the soul. And someday when we too are gone, our cities turn to coral and dust, the ocean will whisper our name to another generation who stands on its shore and wonders what world came before. Memory, it seems, has its own gravity. What is forgotten does not vanish. It only drifts, waiting for the right current, the right mind, the right century to bring it ashore again. And now, as satellites orbit and sonar scans the deep, as archaeologists cut through jungle and time alike, the past begins to wake. Not as legend this time, but as evidence. As if the earth herself were whispering softly, patiently, "You're beginning to remember." In the green heart of the Amazon, a story long thought impossible is rising from beneath the trees. For centuries, the forest was imagined as virgin, untouched, uninhabited, chaotic. But from the air, new eyes have seen a geometry beneath the leaves. Circles, roads, canals, plazas, the ghostly fingerprints of a civilization that planned, that cultivated, that thrived. Satellite imagery and LiDAR reveal networks of ancient towns linked by causeways stretching for miles. Soil enriched beyond nature's design, known as terra preta, still feeds the forest like a pulse of ancient intelligence. It seems the Amazon was not a wilderness, but a garden, a living architecture shaped by human hands, then reclaimed by green silence. And now, with every scan, the jungle exhales another secret. The people we thought primitive were perhaps the gardeners of a forgotten Eden. Half a world away, in the frozen north, another whisper emerges, not in stone or soil, but in blood. Geneticists, tracing the fragile threads of ancestry, have found echoes of ghost populations, DNA signatures belonging to no known tribe or region. Invisible people, not lost, but unclassified. They lived, loved, died, and vanished into the fog of deep time, leaving behind only traces in the genomes of the living. Their presence rewrites maps without moving a single river. It suggests that whole chapters of our story exist outside the textbooks, civilizations that rose and fell before the languages that could describe them. Perhaps these ghost lineages are the descendants of the flood survivors, or the inheritors of the teachers from the sea. Or perhaps they are something older still, a memory carried in the very code of life, as if the human body itself were a library. And in the blue heart of the Mediterranean, rusting quietly on the seafloor near the island of Antikythera, lies an object that should not exist. A machine, 2,000 years old, its bronze gears as delicate as clockwork, its purpose astronomical. The Antikythera mechanism, crafted in the time of Aristotle, predicted eclipses, planetary motions, and the calendar of the ancient world with a precision we did not think possible until the Renaissance. When the divers first lifted it from the depths, they thought it was a lump of coral. But when the encrusted layers were peeled away, it revealed cogs, inscriptions, and the unmistakable mark of genius. A remnant of something once common, now miraculous. Proof that knowledge is not a line of ascent, but a tide, advancing, retreating, advancing again. And further east on the island of Crete, another enigma rests. The Phaistos disk, spun from fired clay, its surface impressed with spirals of symbols no one can read. For more than a century, linguists have stared at it as if it were a mirror. Some see a hymn, some see mathematics, some see the memory of a voice that forgot how to be heard. The truth, perhaps, is simpler and sadder. The disk speaks a language of a world that no longer exists, a tongue swallowed by the flood of time. Yet here it is, spinning still in the silence of museums, its message intact but untranslated, like a sealed letter addressed to the future. From the depths of the ocean, from the canopy of the forest, from the spiral of our genes, these fragments rise like bubbles from the floor of eternity. Each one a clue, a heartbeat from a civilization the earth has not quite forgotten. The cities beneath the trees, the ghosts in our DNA, the machine beneath the waves, the disk that refuses to speak. Together, they form a constellation. Not in the sky this time, but in the dark between what we know and what we've lost. Perhaps we are not discovering the past. Perhaps the past is remembering us. Perhaps the act of curiosity itself is the world's way of awakening. For memory is not linear. It behaves like water, pooling, sinking, evaporating, then returning as rain. When the time is right, when the air is still enough, it falls again where it is needed most. Maybe these artifacts are not coincidences, but a gentle rain of remembrance. Each one landing softly on the surface of modern certainty. Each one whispering the same thing. You have been here before. Science at its best is not the opposite of myth. It is the continuation of it, told in the dialect of proof. And as our tools grow sharper, our satellites keener, we find ourselves walking back into the very stories we once dismissed as legend. The map is closing its own circle. The myth of the flood, the memory of the lost continents, the gods who came from the sea, all ripple through these discoveries like music faintly remembered from a dream. Every fossil, every shard, every coded double helix is a voice saying, "We have been many. We have built before. We have forgotten, and we have remembered again." Perhaps that is the meaning of civilization itself. Not invention, but recollection. To learn not new things, but old truths, spoken anew each time the waters recede. And so the evidence gathers, not as proof to end wonder, but as invitation to deepen it. Each find is a mirror held up to the cosmos, showing us our own reflection stretching backward into eternity. The forest, the ocean, the gene, the machine, each one says, the past is not gone. It is dreaming beneath our feet, waiting for us to remember. Night closes like an eyelid. The old chapters of memory settle into stillness, and in that silence, a low rhythm begins to rise, steady, ancient, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. We have walked through fire. We have walked through water, through buried temples and unmovable stones. We have listened to the teachers who came from the sea, watched the sky be carved upon the land, and heard science finally catch up with myth. Now, as we place our hands upon the cool surface of the planet, we feel a faint vibration, a tension in the string of time. The cycle is returning. The ice is cracking, like glass under the slow weight of dawn. Glaciers, the frozen diaries of the climate, have begun to move again, groaning softly as they melt into rivers of memory. Each droplet carries a record, each fracture a warning. You can almost hear it, the clock of geology ticking back toward something familiar. And the sea is rising. Not as a wall, not yet, but as a breath. Long, patient, irresistible. Coastlines blur, letters of land rewritten by the pen of the tide. Cities whisper lessons that their ancestors once shouted. The ocean does not only erase soil, It erases memory, language, belonging. The climate is changing its voice. Winds hum in higher tones, storms grow unpredictable, and the calendar, once loyal, begins to falter. Farmers look up to the wrong sky. The monsoon forgets its cue. Even the trees hesitate before budding, as if waiting for instructions that never come. We have told this story before. The fire that fell from heaven, the ice that broke, the floods that followed. We once called it myth. Now we call it pattern. The planet is not punishing us. It is simply continuing to breathe. But if the rhythm returns, must the tragedy repeat? Perhaps not. No leaf ever falls the same way twice. A cycle is an old melody played on new instruments. The fire of the past was comet and flame. The fire of the present is invisible, heat trapped in air, slow, steady, relentless. The water of the past came in a day, the water of the present comes by millimeters, but its message is the same. Remember your altitude. In our shining cities, we believe we have escaped the old rhythms. Elevators, satellites, fiber optics, each one a small charm against fear. But the earth does not recognize our comforts. It only listens to balance. And when balance shifts, the language of the earth is rain, wind, tide, and silence that lasts longer than we expect. The ancients taught us this. What must endure must be carved in stone. What must survive the flood must be built on hills, and what must cross the dark must be sung. If reset is destiny, then remembering is freedom. We cannot stop the turning, but we can choose what to carry when it turns. Picture a near future. The air a little saltier, the sea line a little higher, maps revised like rumors. Roads with old trees become canals. Children draw new continents in the margins of their school books, and the word relocation, ancient, necessary, returns. It does not only move homes, it moves memory, from the window that once faced the sea to the attic that now watches it approach. We have lived this before, though none of us can remember clearly. It lingers in lullabies about small boats, in traditions of building one handspan above the flood, in temples facing hills instead of rivers, in stories told around fire when the rain will not end. All these are maps of survival, tiny instructions left in culture, teaching us how to keep fire dry in the long wet season. But this time, we have a new advantage. We speak the language of evidence. We can read the rings of trees, the layers of silt, the trapped air inside ancient ice. We can see the lost cities under forest, the machines under the sea, the ghost DNA of forgotten peoples. Memory now has coordinates. And if history is a circle, then science is the compass that shows us where we stand upon it. What will we do with that compass? We can build lighter, higher, smarter. We can learn again from ancient blueprints. Temples that breathe with the wind, houses that float, villages that move with the seasons like migrating birds. We can rebuild ritual itself as technology. Eat slower, burn less, listen more. For silence is the first step of adaptation. The returning cycle is not punishment, it is correction. The planet, like a heart, must sometimes quicken its pulse to restore rhythm. Our task is not to stop that rhythm, but to move in time with it. Resilience is not victory, it is choreography. To survive a cycle is to pack wisely. Not everything must be carried, only what cannot drown. Principles, kindness, stories, songs that teach high ground and deep patience. We are not alone in this turning. The hands that once lifted stones, the eyes that once counted stars, the voices that sang through ancient storms. They are still with us, woven into our reflexes, our instincts, our lullabies. They left us the muscle memory of survival. We only need to remember how to use it. One day, water will knock again. In some places, with a named storm. In others, with a quiet tide that does not go back out. And when that moment comes, we will choose to open the door in fear or in readiness, to call it an ending or a pause, the turning of the great wheel, the moment between breaths. Perhaps hidden inside this coming reset there is mercy, a chance to rearrange, to rewrite our values, to return what belongs to sea and soil, and to keep what belongs to soul. Kindness, restraint, and the art of remembering softly. Look behind you now, you will see the circle complete. Fire, water, temple, sky, science, memory, and now, motion. Ahead lies the twilight of one era, but twilight always carries dawn inside it. From the indigo horizon, the first stars already flicker a quiet message. Go slowly, go higher, go together. Because reset does not mean a race. Reset means recomposition, a chance to rewrite the melody of civilization. If the old song was too loud, let the new one be gentle. If the old memory was heavy, let the new one travel light. In small things, a painted flood mark on a wall, a floating garden, a story told before sleep. The wind moves through the city tonight like the hand of an old narrator, turning the final pages. And in the margin, only one sentence remains. We have been before, and we will be again. Do not panic. Remember, prepare, as our ancestors once did, with calm, with courage, with rhythm. For Earth is not against us, she is merely counting the beat. Close your eyes. Feel your breath match hers. If you can sense that synchronization, you are already standing in the right place. The one who carries memory across the river. And on the far shore, when the dawn of a new cycle opens, we will not call ourselves victims. We will call ourselves keepers of the flame. The story nears its final hush, not an ending, but a long rest between movements, so the music can linger. The flood withdraws, slowly, almost tenderly, like a tide reluctant to leave the shore it has just remade. The air smells of salt and renewal. The earth glistens, raw and clean, as if she, too, has been reborn. It is always quiet after the storm. In that quiet, something extraordinary happens. Life returns, hesitantly at first, then confidently, as though it remembers its steps. The birds call, the wind softens, and in the hollows where water once raged, new seeds begin to take root. So it has always been. Each deluge writes its own ending, not in destruction, but in continuity. No civilization has ever survived forever. But memory, that fragile, invisible current, has never once stopped flowing. When the waters recede, stone remains. And in the stone, stories. And in those stories, us. We are not the first to begin again, nor will we be the last. We are simply the latest verse in a song older than the continents. Once, long ago, there was a world, bright, ordered, confident. It believed itself eternal. Its cities were mirrors of the stars. Its temples spoke the language of mathematics. But the ocean came, and in one night its certainty was undone. If the great flood was the first reset, then memory was the last vessel that crossed it. Not the ark of wood, but the ark of words, carried not by a few chosen souls, but by the collective instinct of all who refuse to forget. Every myth is a raft, every song a life jacket, every story told by firelight is a bridge thrown across the abyss of time. We often mistake monuments for permanence, but it is story, not stone, that truly endures. Stone erodes. Memory migrates. When the last temple falls, the last story will still be told. By a mother to her child, by a traveler to a stranger, by a whisper to the wind. That is how civilizations survive extinction. Not by resisting change, but by translating themselves into something that can float. And so, after each cataclysm, after each fall, humanity begins the same ritual. We look at the ruins and ask, who built these? Why were they forgotten? And in the asking, we begin to rebuild, not only cities, but connection. To remember is to participate in creation itself. To recall the past is to call it back into being. Every story told is an act of resurrection. The flood teaches us this. You can lose everything, your homes, your archives, your monuments, But if you carry memory, you have not truly drowned. Because memory is not a record, it is a living current. It flows through language, through music, through intuition. It changes form the way water does, from vapor to cloud to rain to river. Never destroyed, only transformed. That is why the ancients built as they did. Why they aligned stone with stars, buried temples in earth, and carved myths into the constellations themselves. They understood that matter decays, but meaning, if spoken in the language of the cosmos, can last forever. And now we stand where they once stood, at the edge of another sea, watching the water rise and fall, feeling the pull of another beginning. It is our turn to remember. We too have our floods. They come as data, as noise, as forgetting disguised as convenience. We scroll instead of sing, we consume instead of listen. The water is digital now, but it drowns us just the same. And yet, somewhere beneath the static, a rhythm persists, a voice older than speech, a pulse saying, "Tell the story," again. Because that is how we keep the fire lit, by repetition, by tenderness, by speaking softly into the dark and trusting that someone, somewhere, is still listening. Every civilization has its moment of silence, the pause between collapse and creation. In that silence, we are most alive. Because it is there, in the breath after loss, that we decide who we will be next. Will we build again in arrogance or in reverence? Will we choose height or depth, speed or balance, noise or listening? The flood has taken much, but it has left us one sacred gift, the chance to remember better. We have learned that knowledge without wisdom is noise that echoes in empty halls. That progress without humility is a tower already leaning. That the true legacy of a civilization is not its power, but its capacity to remember what matters most. Kindness, balance, awe. When the water pulls back from the land, it reveals not just ruin, but reflection. The mud holds impressions of footprints, and in those footprints, a question. What did we learn this time? Perhaps this is the secret of eternity, that the universe too learns through repetition, that even stars die and are reborn, that memory is the gravity of the cosmos itself, holding together what would otherwise drift apart. Civilizations come and go, but the story remains. It flows through time like a river that refuses to end, changing its banks, but never its direction. And when we tell these stories of fire and flood, of gods and engineers, of temples and stars, we are not speaking of the past at all. We are remembering forward. We are preparing the next generation of listeners, the ones who will wake one dawn to find the sea closer, the air warmer, the horizon unfamiliar. And they will know what to do, because we will have left them more than warnings. We will have left them memory shaped like wisdom. This, then, is the final truth. No civilization is immortal, but the act of remembrance is. Every story told with sincerity becomes a seed in the soil of the next world. Every word spoken in reverence becomes a bridge to those who will rise when we fall. So when the waters recede and the world gleams clean again, we will not ask to be eternal. We will ask only that our stories remain, to guide the ones who come after, as others once guided us. Because civilization, at its core, is not invention. It is continuity. It is the refusal to let silence have the last word. It is the courage to say, even after the flood, we are still here. And so in this final quiet, we listen one last time to the hum beneath the soil, the whisper of water retreating into distance, the heartbeat of a planet still dreaming. When the waters recede, memory remains. And in that memory, the story of who we are and who we will become goes on.